What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now look, it's been almost a month since this movie came out, but I'm finally going to give you my review of Wonder Woman 1984. I didn't actually get to see it when it first came out. It's only been within like the last week, probably, that I've actually seen it. I've seen it twice. Yeah, just over a week since I first saw it. So yeah, I was able to go sort of do like a first viewing, sort of that initial reaction, being able to actually see it in the theaters. This is the third film I've seen since cinemas have reopened. So there was Tenet to begin with, then Monster Hunter earlier this month, and now Wonder Woman, which I've seen twice. So we're getting back to some normalcy here in Australia. But yeah, so I'm going to do a film review. If you haven't seen any of my film reviews before, basically I take the film, I dismantle it into its pieces, look at each individually just on its own as a piece. So I was going to be reviewing a film purely based on the story. That's one of those parts. Its script and its story. And then, so I give them a score each out of 10, which 10 by 10 is 100, allowing me to easily just put a percentage sign at the end, because that's what percent means. It means of 100, or out of 100, and we end up with the score out of 100. Which goes very nicely with the fact that most critic sites like Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic use percentages. You might get like IMDb, I think, uses decimals. What you do there is you take the decimal point out and you put a percentage sign in, and you've got your percentage. So I also look at those, so we can sort of get a bit of a ballpark idea. It also lets you sort of see what sort of trends are going, as well as what kind of audience each site has, which is always very interesting as well. Rotten Tomatoes is sort of, I feel like, the top one. So we're going to do its scores first. The critics gave it a 60%, to be fair, so did Metacritics. The critics on both those sites gave this film 60%. But the Rotten Tomatoes audience score is a 74%, which is like a point off being in, that top quarter of good films, which is pretty good praise for this film. Whereas the Metacritic user score was 39%, which is bordering between the bottom half and the bottom quarter. Like you're almost at that midpoint between those two. So we're gonna have we got some outliers, okay? We got some outliers in our score. IMDb gave it a 5.5, which, as I've already explained, is 55%. When you add those up and divide by 5 to get an average score, you get 57.6. Now this is, despite the fact we've got two 60s and a 74, it's largely due to that 39% from the users on Metacritic that this is sitting down around 57. So let's break the film down. So the 10 parts are, as I've mentioned before, our story, our cast. People will go see films purely based on who's in it. Johnny Depp, for example. We're going to leave that one where that is, and move right along. The performances, were the actors' performances believable? This also has to do with the directing as well. The director's choices on how the characters should interact with each other and react to certain things within the environment. Did they make sense? Did they add to the story? Did they subtract from the story? That's all in performance. The editing, which also includes the cinematography. Are the angles engaging? Does the editing give you some sense of urgency, or is it just I know that Creed has the movie Creed has like a 4-minute long shot to really just sort of and the camera moves one way while the actors are moving another way to sort of to give you this sort of like you're actually there watching it sort of thing. What cinematic decisions did they make there? The sets and the locations is the next one. We then have our soundtrack, which is our music as well as the original scoring in the background. For music itself, this is more like licensed songs. Do they add to the atmosphere of, like, for this film, it being 1984, or for the score, does it give you that sense of like adventure, or tension or drama or whatever it's supposed to evoke? We've then got our special and visual effects, which is due to what number 8 is, largely just the CG and like the practical effects, like the explosions and stuff. Number 8 is the costuming and makeup, hence why our special effects is not looking at special effects makeup, because it's not a visual artist, it's a makeup artist. And we need to congratulate those unsung heroes, because they do some incredible work in making us believe that people are actually bleeding. Because 9 times out of 10 they're not. Number 9, the new one for this year, sort of the 2021 postage stamp, is its themes and morals. Does the film, end with a compelling message? Did the characters' arcs throughout the story and how the performances and everything else sort of came together, did it culminate in a really good message that's going to stay with you after you leave the cinema? Considering that I haven't just come back from the cinema, I feel like I can actually properly give this one a score. And then number 10, our last one, is its accuracy or originality. So accuracy is to source material, which this one has, those being Wonder Woman comics, and originality would be if it's a new piece, like Tenet was. Okay, so let's dive in, now that explanation's out of the way. 5 of these have 7s. So we've got the story, the performance, the editing, the soundtrack, and the accuracy and originality. All have 7. So we'll start with story. I mean, look, it wasn't like a bare minimum story-wise. There was some meat on the bones. It fell victim to 2 things. Sequelitis, which I'm convinced is a very real thing that afflicts only those in Hollywood. Because books don't ever seem to have sequelitis, I've found. But films do. And it's usually original films. This one sort of gets it because it's only based on characters, not on actual events. Like the Marvel movies generally are better because they're based on actual storylines from the comics. DC's sort of given those to the TV shows, and so the movies sort of lack this nostalgia that comes from being able to relive or retell those stories to a new generation, especially since this is sort of the main way general audiences are consuming these stories. You want to be putting your best stories into the films so that a fan of the franchise, of like the comics, can be like, look at this is A, a really good film, but B, one of my favourite comic book stories involving this character. and in that way, fans can share their, yeah. I think I've explained that well enough. The performance and the editing are sort of the main parts of that. Editing would have been higher. There is some great editing. Problem is, most of the really good shots or good sequences were involved in the trailers. There wasn't really a whole lot left to discover. All of the character development was left to discover, but none of the action really was to discover, because everyone's seen in the trailers the bit where she uses the lasso to swing off the lightning, which is a whole other thing that I want to get into, not in this video. That's a whole other thing. Science disagrees. Everyone's seen her get flipped up by that truck as it tumbles around. Everybody has seen little snippets of her fight with Cheetah. Everybody, there wasn't a whole heap of action left for the film to explore. And if we're being honest, those were kind of the only action scenes. Oh, and the bit in the White House and the bit in the mall at the beginning. Both of those were also in the trailer, and that's it. Those are the action sequences. That's it. So there was no action left. Character development was really good, and obviously the way it was edited together was really good. But yeah, editing gets a 7 purely because it could have been better, but it was still really good. And then yeah, Sequel Eyes hit it hard. If you're wanting to show, if you're a Wonder Woman fan and you're wanting to show a friend a Wonder Woman movie, give them the first one. The one thing I want to sort of point out about the whole sequelitis bit. In the first film, Ares says that he's not the god of war, he's the god of truth, and that the truth is humans are just like that, which, is really cool commentary on human nature. So for this film, to then be like, oh yeah, no, everyone has wants and power of the wish, and then that MacGuffin that can grant wishes being tied to the gods, and that god ending up being the Mayan god of lies, feels like they were like, well, in the first one we dealt with truth, why don't we deal with lies? You could have gone with something else. And there's even that part in the film where they're trying to figure out which god would have given this thing this power. A god of love, maybe a god of fortune, your hopes. And no, they went with lies. They went with a trickster god. Which, I get, but a dreamstone's not exactly an April Fool's prank. That's like a one and done genie wish thing. Which I get why they went with a dark entity, because genies and jinns can sometimes be confused for demons, and doing a deal with the devil sort of thing. But it would have been really cool to see a god being like, oh, I want to grant your greatest wishes, doing that without realizing that everything has a cost, the same way that most people don't. And then have the villains turn this should be a good thing into the bad thing. Instead, it just starts out as a bad thing, and a bad person gets it, and it becomes even worse. special visual effects are really cool. The top one I can think of is the Invisible Jet. Yeah, this film, on that, I know that the Invisible Jet is like iconic for Wonder Woman. The way they brought it in and made it like, oh yeah, this is how she gets the Invisible Jet. This is set in 1984. It's therefore set before Dawn of Justice and Justice League. In those films, she can't turn things invisible or fly, and yet she apparently learnt both of those abilities in 1984. This film creates problems for continuity. So if we all want to consider 2021's DC movies as and beyond as part of a new DCEU, right? Like maybe this is just Wonder Woman on like Earth 2, and maybe, who knows? The Flash film might be like, wow, we've made a lot of plot, a lot of problems with the plot and stuff, and like there are certain actors that a lot of fans don't want in these films. Cool, well we're doing a Flashpoint anyway, so let's fix those. They're gonna probably get criticised that that's lazy, but you can't give your character that we've already seen in a future time space developing new powers that they didn't have in that future time space. Because if she could have flown, why just like there were so many times, especially in Justice League, where her flying would have been so useful. Especially since she's essentially the only one that was actually able to, just on power level, stand up to Superman once they resurrected him. If she'd been able to fly, she would have been able to go up and, catch Batman before he, like, falls after Superman, like, lifts him up by the throat. Or, like, it creates problems. And then, yeah, accuracy and originality. Gonna be honest, this score is purely based off what I know of Maxwell Lord and from Supergirl, and what I know of Cheetah from Injustice, and we're gonna get onto this, but there are a couple of shots there, particularly the first time you sort of see her like silhouette, where I was almost convinced that they used the exact same like vibe of her Injustice costume, like just the base costume you get when you're playing as Cheetah in Injustice, because the similarities were remarkable, and I just want to applaud them on that. I thought that was really nice. But yeah, so it's based on my knowledge of Cheetah from that. Maxwell Lord from I'm pretty sure it's Supergirl that he's in. And then obviously Wonder Woman from the rest of the DCU. I am not a big DC fan, if I'm being completely honest. Marvel's more my speed. I find it more difficult to relate to the heroes in DC because of their gods amongst men approach, rather than the everyman with powers approach that Marvel has. And in recent years, the comics have tried to sort of balance this out by, like, you know, giving their characters home lives and stuff. And this film definitely explores Diana's home life, and kind of keeps true to that, you know, you've segregated yourself from society for 200 years line from Dawn of Justice. But if that were true, this film wouldn't have been until 1984, so again, causes problems. But yeah, it causes issues. It causes so many issues. But yeah, no, so the comics sort of have tried to include, you know, their like home lives and stuff and give them relationships and relatable things. But at the end of the day, they're still gods amongst men. Whereas, you know, Peter Parker's story has always been about how does he balance, you know, like school life or work life with him being Spider-Man. How can he pursue relationships without bringing them into his adversary's, you know, like line of fire as a way to get to him. You know, Tony Stark has always been about, you know, protecting his legacy, which is his Iron Man suits and stuff, and trying to keep them out of, you know, greedy corporate hands or corrupt government hands or whatever it might be. That's always been his story. Whereas Superman was originally just a superhero with fantastic abilities who later on was like, oh, let's humanize him by saying that he's like a refugee from a planet that destroyed itself. He grew up in, you know, he grew up on a farm in rural USA. That'll make him relatable to kids, and like, you know what I mean? Like they tried to give him a backstory rather than just here's the backstory and we can continue on from here. And yes, the comics have occasionally from Marvel come back to and just like done a reprint or like this is a bit you didn't see before that we didn't tell you before side of things for the story, but it otherwise has remained the same, and those points are only put in so that you understand the context of a particular character within that storyline, and how, you know, it's been that way since the beginning, instead of retconning it like halfway through to be like, oh yeah, no, this is his backstory, by the way. So yeah. Anyway, moving on, try and get through these as quickly as possible. I've got 3 8s. We've got the cast, the costuming and makeup, and the themes and morals. And then the last 2 are sets, which has a 6, and soundtrack, which has a 5. Both of these were like, they did their job, but other than that, were largely forgettable. Like, the mall is a 1980s mall. Personally, the one in Stranger Things is more convincing. And I'm going to be completely honest, just on like the ground floor level, on the shots where she's like actually on like the ground floor, not up in like the 2nd or 3rd floor, I thought it was the exact same set. There were moments there, because it's in a food court as well, just like that, the battle with the Mind Flayer at the end of season 3, in the food court. It's, you know, very 1980s. It's, I legitimately thought it was the same set for like half a minute. The power station, the satellite or whatever it's supposed to be, looks exactly like that. But that scene's largely at night time, so any smaller details they put in there to be like, oh yeah, no, these are going to be some, you know, really cool like aesthetic things, you can't see because the scenes are dark. You know what I mean? And sort of our big sort of filler piece is the car chase in Saudi Arabia, which is in a desert. It's just lots of sand and a road, and that's what it looks like. It looks like a road through the middle of a desert. And other than that, I can't tell you any like specific things about them. They're just sort of, yep, that's that looks believable for where we're supposed to be. But other than that, there wasn't like any wow factor to them. And our eights, as I said, the cast. I mean, at this point, I think Gal Gadot could just like you just put her name in front of anything, and people will go see it, and I will. So there's her. Pedro Pascal is. We love our Mando. So putting him in the film was a really smart idea. Kristen Wiig's really funny, and she plays Barbara, not Cheetah necessarily, but she plays Barbara with. To start with like she leans into her comedy acting, and it's great. And then as she starts to get like darker and darker and become more of a villain throughout the film, I felt like she tried to oversell it. And I think that comes from being more of a comic actor than being more of a dramatic one. The being darker was a little more interesting for her. Costume and the makeup, as I said before, I literally thought the costume for Cheetah was like piece for piece the skin from Injustice 2. So like on that point, just big old tick. The gold armor being explained as being like all of the armor the Amazons had on them at that time being put together to make an armor that could hold back the entire world, was really was a really cool piece of like backstory for that particular stunning piece of armor. And then like I said before, the parts where Diana starts to lose her invulnerability and has like bruises and cuts and all sorts of stuff all over her, just brilliantly done. There is a really cool transition when she revokes her wish, which is to have Steve back, and then she starts running, and you can see her start to like pick up speed as she's running before she like does a big superhero jump, where if you're paying close enough attention, you can actually see the bruise sort of on her chest here and the cut on her arm heal themselves as she's running, which is really cool. No words. That's probably one of my favorite shots, if I'm being completely honest. It's not even a particularly significant shot. Like cinematically speaking, like it's just a character running, but the way that transition happens is amazing. And then the themes and morals, and obviously saving this one for last because it's the moral at the end of the story, is I think they tried to put a couple in, which is why this sort of falls a little bit flat on its face. But the one that I took away from it the most is sort of, because at the beginning they try to establish that it's like no true hero can come from lies, and that's the god of lies, and then she has to revoke her wish and therefore revoke the god of lies in order to beat the bad guys. I think they tried to go with that, but I had friends tell me that they thought it was, all about like love and stuff, and how like, sometimes you have to move on from things in order for things to get better, sort of thing. There were a few morals, but I sort of took it as a more of like a message of like gratitude, like be thankful that things happened, be thankful that things are happening, and be thankful that things will happen in the future, because if you're true to yourself, coming back to this whole idea of like truth and lies, if you're true to yourself, then only the best will happen for you in the future, and I thought that was a really great moral. So yeah, when we add all of those numbers up, we get a 70%. What I'm going to call an Oslo score is a one screw loose overall score. So yeah, 70% Oslo, and that's my review of Wonder Woman. If you liked this video, we are getting low on battery. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you are new here, and ring that notification bell if you want to be notified when I upload new videos. Leave a comment below if you've seen the film. What was your favourite part about it? What was your least favourite part about it? Let's discuss in the comment section down below. And yeah, with all that being said and done, until next time guys, keep your head screwed on.